there, Barry Eaton here, and welcome to Radio Out There. And my special guest this week, all the way from England. And we go over there to speak to Phill Webster, who I spoke to last year on the program, and talking about his wonderful brand new book called Going Deeper. Hi, Phill. Good to talk to you again. How are you?
Hey, Barry. Thank you. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, last June, you and I talked about your very first book, Letting Glow. Now we have
Yeah.
Letting Glow Part 2. Now, why do you stick with the same title? Just put Part 2 on there.
Oh no, it's called Glowing Deeper, book two of the Letting Glow trilogy. So
Ah,
somebody might have messed up there,
oh, okay.
sending me the details. But
I think I may have
yeah,
got,
so it's
I think I may have got the
it
wrong
is, yeah.
PR release there.
No,
All
yeah,
right.
but I kind of conceived it as a trilogy. And yeah, so second book. So I'm still waiting for the third one, but yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So why the word glow? What does that mean?
I just felt like in the first one with Letting Glow, I didn't really know what to call it. And I was going through the meditations that I'd put in the first book,
Mm,
after sort of like, so just going over it all one more time. And I'd use the term letting glow, and I thought that was a nice play on because it's, that I poured a lot of my own grief into that book, and then sort of, all the amazing things that came from that in
mm.
delving into the world of spirituality. I felt that Letting Glow was just essentially a nice play on, grieving, but there's, sort of coming out of it a little bit brighter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's fair enough. And of course, you have had to do a bit of letting go, haven't you, with your mother passing and
Yeah.
dealing with that because she was such an important part of your life, but you have maintained contact with her, and that's the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there was this event that we talked about last time, around when she passed, that really sent me down this a supernatural event, essentially,
Mm,
that really just changed the course of everything for me. Of course, when we lose somebody close to us and a parent in particular, it was really like stepping into an alternate universe. So through all of the grief and the shock and everything that comes with that, this very strange thing had happened, which opened the door for me to, explore this, spirituality, and specifically mediumship. And then, yeah, all sorts of amazing things happened. And I do believe that, yeah, that I've definitely heard from her since. So yeah, it's just really changed my whole outlook on life, essentially.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think to be able to say that because everybody I find gets some kind of contact with their very close ones. I know
Mm,
my father turned up. Amazing. I was working on air in Vienna at the time. He turned up in the
mm.
church an hour after he passed in Sydney. And I know
Wow.
it was him. I know it was him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But, they
Yeah,
come
that's
to
the
us in
thing.
many different ways.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, for me, like initially, like it was just other than what happened around my mum passing, where when I saw somebody on the phone with her, I'd like standing beside her the night before she passed, and I
Mm,
dismissed it. Other than that, which was a very sort of specific visual, experience. I think a lot of these things do come in as like this undeniable sense of knowing, and
mm.
when you experience that,
Yeah, yeah.
you
You,
you just know that it's sorry.
no, 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 go on.
Yeah, it's just it's so palpable, but I mean, it's also so subjective. But when you know, essentially. Yeah.
That's true. Well, you talk about it in your book as an SDE, shared death experience. That's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, some people might dispute that. That I've dove very much into the sort of spiritual literature, if you can call it that, of these experiences that people have had. So after my mum passed, I went back to her house, and it took a long time to get there. It was in COVID time, so it had taken the whole day. And anyone that's been through this, knows what it's like, sort of returning to my childhood home, and it was empty. And my mum had passed like earlier that day. But I went to bed that night, and I had a very, I mean, I'm still going to call it a dream, like a very profound dream.
Mm,
Um, and I was having that horrible experience of, when something shocking like this happens, you wake up and there's that second that you forget about it, and then it all hits you all over again. And it's
mm,
just my heart goes out to anyone going through that because it's the worst. But somewhere during this night, I did have this very powerful dream, and I was standing with my mum, and it was just such a vivid experience. So we were in a room of sort of swirling colors and just really, again, very, I can't think of, very visceral. And I was talking to her and I was explaining what happened to her. And I said, well, they said it was your heart. And I remember her hand going to her chest and her looking sort of confused. And essentially I knew that wherever she was going was right behind her. And I said, well, this is it. You've got to go, mum. And we sort of had this conversation. And she said, well, are you going to be okay? And I was like, yeah, yeah, I'll be fine. I
Mm.
was being sort of very logical in this whatever this was.
Yeah,
And she turned and left, and then I woke up in floods of tears, and I'm convinced that that was more than sort of wishful thinking, more than a dream.
mm.
Um, again, it was just so different to everything else. And then sort of learning about these things as I went on, it is quite common for people to experience a shared death experience with someone that's passing over, and people, nurses have talked about it in hospitals and all that kind of thing. Again, this might not qualify for that exact term, being as I was in this sleep state. But again, it was further on down the line, having more experiences. I looking back on that, I believe that was again a very sort of subjective supernatural experience again.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much. Now, the whole, I think the important thing, if you're going to develop and whatever, is your intuition. And you write about that in the early part of your book, the power and benefit of intuition. So, the power of intuition. I've always just accepted my intuition, but you're right. There's a lot of power involved, isn't there? Power to the
Mm.
person involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said this quite a few times. It's kind of starting to turn it into almost like a bit of a catchphrase. But I feel that we all have these moments of a gut feeling or an inner
Mm.
knowing, or one of my favorites is you can cut the air with a knife when you walk into a room. And everyone agrees that this is a thing, but when you start talking about clairvoyance or clairsentience, then typically people might look at you like you're nuts. But I think that we're talking about the same thing. I think that we're talking about the same experience, but we're just using different terms for it. And yeah, I think that there absolutely is power in it. I feel that there's also, I mean, we all have these moments, but I feel that again, sort of, if you open up to this and start developing in these areas, then I feel that there's also a fine line between intuition and impulsiveness, and I feel that that's sort of the important part to recognize. As a medium, typically you sort of go with the first thing that comes in, and give that evidence to somebody else, and that tends to be the way that it works, and that gives you results. But I feel like it takes some time to get there, and I feel that meditation is really the key to sort
Mm.
of be able to find that space where you can recognize intuition separate from your thoughts.
That's right.
Yeah.
And finding that peace within yourself as well, because there's so much
Yeah.
going on in the mind all the time
Mm.
and so much going on
That's it.
around you. You have to calm down, go right into that lovely, you taught meditation. You've got some nice
Mm.
meditations in the book, by the way. And
No, thank
also,
you.
we need to go into that space. When I do a reading for somebody and I tune in, medium-wise or whatever, I have to go into my total inner space, tune out, and focus on connecting with the other side. And I
Mm.
think people might say, oh, well, how can I do that? How can I learn intuition? But it's different for everybody. So, how did you develop your intuition?
Yeah, I feel like I had a few things on the way that almost guided me that I dismissed. So one thing that happened again around my mum passing, it made me look back on other things that had happened in the past, that some more profound than others, but it would seem that every few years something would sort of tap me on the shoulder, and I had a very powerful awakening a few years, well, about 10 years prior to my
Mm,
mum
mm,
passing, that I
mm.
completely dismissed as just some sort of I went to doctors about it. I thought that I was kind of losing my mind.
Really?
Um, yeah,
Mm,
well, yeah, it was diagnosed as psychosis. They gave me a bunch of meds, and none of it touched it. And I really was, for want of a better expression, at the end of my rope, quite literally.
mm.
And I found a psychiatrist who amazingly was well versed in lots of sort of spiritual aspects of life, for one, to sort of try to sort of put it in a nutshell. And he
Maybe your
gave me a
footsteps were
meditation.
directed in his way because there's not too many psychologists around who do that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, when he brought all this stuff up, I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds nuts to me. But I was like, okay, I was willing to sort of take anything that would help. And he gave me a very basic grounding meditation that essentially just brought me back instantly.
Mm,
So through these meds and the sort of traditional sort of medicine, none of that touched it. And
mm,
one meditation brought me back, and that sort of, and again at the time I was like, okay, great, and just put the whole experience behind me, and I was just kind of thankful to sort of
mm,
be back online. But again, in hindsight, looking back at it, I feel that this whole thing was kind of leading to where I am now. So just to sort of bring it back to meditation, I found like a really like I had a very profound experience of sort of experiencing the moment of now, which
mm,
is what I went through back
mm,
then, and I feel that that is like something that's really important to connect to when we sit in meditation, to just
mm,
be able to really connect with this moment. And when you sort of open that door and go down that road, it does there's a lot around that, which amazes me. I'm always sort of talking about how we really truly only have this experience of now all the time,
mm,
which again sort of can lead you in many different sort of quantum directions and what have you. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's truly it. And I feel again, just to bring it back to meditation, that's really the key. Just connecting with the moment of now, taking that time with yourself and just tuning in. Yeah.
Yeah, so anybody who's listening or watching at the moment and they want to develop their intuition, it's a unique thing for everybody. What would you
Mm.
advise them?
Yeah, again, sorry to be a broken record, but I really feel that meditation is really the key.
That's it.
And yeah, and it's a strange one because I it sort of brings up all sorts of different associations and what have you. I didn't
Mm,
really understand what it was until I did it. Um, and then and I didn't really explore it back when I first learned about it. But I feel that, it doesn't have
mm,
to be such a sort of difficult or scary thing. It's literally just sitting for a moment. And we're all going to get distracted. We'll have these thoughts going on constantly. But just being able to recognize that you don't have to get caught up in all that,
yeah,
and just sort of be aware that you're the one observing the thoughts, then that's really the game changer, I
yeah,
think. When
yeah.
you recognize that you're this consciousness that's observing all this stuff
Mm,
going on, and you don't have to sort of get caught up in, the day-to-day sort of trivialities.
no. Well, if you take the word intuition, tuition from within. So it's
Exactly. Yeah.
there. It's there. All you have to
Yeah.
do is learn to connect and then trust.
That's it.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
yeah, it's really been the game changer. And again, sort of going into mediumship, if somebody wanted to explore that, I really believe that that's the first step. That's the
very
key to
much.
sort of, yeah.
Mm, mm. But once again, that develops in individually as well. I mean, I developed as a medium, starting off when I started to write, automatic writing, and then it just
Yeah.
sort of emerged from there. And I grew it.
Yeah.
I went to Arthur Findlay College over in England and did all sorts of courses and whatever, and that helps. But you have to start somewhere and you have to trust. To me, that's very important, that word trust.
Yeah, that's it. And I suppose that's where the skeptics step in and say that, well, when you're looking for this stuff, then you're going to find it. But
Mm,
I think that it does work like that.
yeah.
And again, I've always had like, despite all these things that I talk about, I have got a very sort of healthy skeptic in me that questions all of it. And
Yeah.
and sometimes even when time goes by and I haven't had one of these experiences for a while, I'll start overthinking it. But I think that once you start having enough of these experiences, then you recognize that, oh, okay, this is actually a real
This is one
thing.
of the, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm kind of sort of past sort of trying to convince anyone now, but yeah, it is just a trusting in that what comes to you
Mm.
is legit. Yeah.
Yeah, very true, very true. Now, back to your book, and you talk about the other dimensions. And of course, we live in a three-dimensional reality here, and fourth dimension, fifth dimension, you mentioned those. And a lot of people might see this and think, oh, what's that mean? What's 3D, 4D, 5D? I think you explain it very well in the book. So let's have a little
Nothing.
chat about that now, because I think it's very essential that people know and understand the reality of our interdimensional being.
Yeah, it's a funny one because I do kind of hate labels. So I feel that when I finished Letting Glow, I'd learned so much and I was like, okay, I was just so excited by this whole new world that's where the second book came from. I just really poured it all into that. So I'm talking a lot about these. I just thought, well, what would I want to know about if I was at this stage of my journey where I was? So just kind of poured it into it. And yeah, but I feel that they are useful terms. I think I described it as sort of 3D, just sort of being like how we're all getting on with life at the moment, and then when you sort of step beyond that a little bit, or you sort of glimpse beyond the veil, and forgive me for using all the cliches,
Not at
that
all.
the
I have a book called Past Lives Unveiled that I've written, so I'm
right.
there with you.
Oh, forgive me.
There goes
Yeah.
another of my things today. I just bashed my poor little mouse against it. This is horrible noise he's coming across. Sorry about that.
No, no, no.
But back to 4 and 5D, yeah, because we have to
Yeah,
raise our level of vibration to be able to move into these dimensions and
yeah, absolutely. And I
understand.
feel that they can, yeah, and they might come from, typically when we lose somebody, and that really that sort of does send a lot of people down this path, as it did
Mm,
me. Or there are these moments in life where you might have this odd sort of experience that doesn't
mm,
sort of fit in with everything else, which really sort of opens the gap a little bit.
mm,
And then you sort of go from there. And I feel that once you do step into it, it's very hard to step back. Despite again like sort of having a naturally sort of skeptic mind, I feel that I've had so many experiences now that you can't sort of just go back to worrying about, I mean, of course we all still have to pay the bills, we all have to go to work
mm.
and all the rest of it. We are functioning as in this 3D world, for want of a better expression. But yeah, once you kind of see behind that curtain, then it's
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, all right.
A curtain of materialism. Uh, but also, I mean, we have to live in the world and we have to be there.
Mm.
But raising that vibration, I was told that years ago when I was in a healing center, and I was told to sit in a corner and raise your vibration. And I thought, how do we do that? I was given this wonderful, huge crystal, and I sat there and
Okay,
I raised my vibration. Bing! All of a sudden, I started connecting. It was a fantastic
really?
feeling. So once
Yeah.
again, it's trust and it's opening yourself up, but that might be different for other people. So how do you get rationalize the whole fourth and fifth dimension, moving away from material things?
Yeah, again, I just feel that, we have one interesting thing I found along the way was I would question all of it. Despite, again, seeming to have a lifetime of these things coming along every few years, which I would always dismiss. I'd be like, well, that was odd. But again, these things would typically coming in as a feeling or something like that,
Yeah.
various degrees. Um, but once you sort of step into that world and start recognizing that, then you start to have things to compare them to. I
Mm,
think initially when these things happen, it doesn't come in as like we hear something or see something or touch something. It'll come in as something else. But then you don't really have anything to compare it to, when these moments are typically fleeting. But again, when you open up to it and they start coming on, happening more often,
mm.
then it's sort of you get on that path to being, oh, all right, I'm convinced that this is all going in that direction. So yeah, I just again, sorry, I'm completely going on about meditation all the time, but I just feel that really is the first
That's
step,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
for me. Yeah, yeah,
Well, you ally when you talk about mystical experiences as well and how the brain copes. And you talk about that in a very rational sort of a way. I've not seen that before. So can we go into that a little bit? Because we all have mystical experiences. Most people become very cynical. Oh, that's rubbish, paranormal, what a whole lot of BS. But you explain it very, very well, how the brain copes.
yeah. I think that was it. I think I just sort of touched on it there. Because we're used to going through the world as it is. Again, at the risk of sounding like slightly quite out there, I feel that this whole thing is a mystical experience.
Yeah,
When you
that's all
start
right. You're
peeling
on radio out there right now, so you can be out there, all right?
Yeah. But yeah, well, I feel that when you start peeling back the layers a little bit, and I do always go back to this time thing. I know
Mm,
that at the moment in spiritual communities, people are talking about shifting timelines and all this kind of a buzz term at the moment,
mm,
about sort of having this version of you out there somewhere that's already doing all the things that you want to do. And I feel that if you sort of do look at it from again, that we only have this experience of now, it does open up all these possibilities of everything that's happening is happening right now as a in a suspended sort of state of potential.
mm,
And when you start peeling away that, then it just okay. This is already mystical, we of course we just get on with it. Again, we clock in at work, we go home, and we're used to this way of doing things. But if you sort of think about, we can literally do anything at this moment right now. I could step out there and run into the street and do something crazy, or go this way, or you go left instead of right, and that actually does change your reality to a
mm.
whole new. you know, a whole new direction. So,
That's what
so
we're talking
that
about,
alone.
sliding doors here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. Again, it's such a strange one to sort of try to sort of put in layman's terms, but I feel like again, when you sort of once that has clicked, that's like, oh wow, this is amazing. This whole
Mm.
thing, you know. So I sound like an old hippie or something, but
No, you're
yeah,
not old,
I
mate.
feel
Don't
that
worry.
I feel that it's all around us all the time.
Yeah, of course.
And then again, just sort of once you've had a few of these experiences, or you sort of
Mm.
step into this world,
Mm.
then yeah, all of a sudden you're sort of this thing that's sort of running alongside us, all the time. Is yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that made me think is that you are very explicit in saying that you are not your thoughts. And
Mm,
you've mentioned that several times. So I think there's always been the thought, well, I have to think something before I can make it happen. So there has to be a
yeah.
thought factor in there. So how do you rationalize you are not your thoughts?
Yeah, I've just sort of come to this realized this lately that I've wrote two books about saying that we're not our thoughts. But there is a lot of literature out there that says that, you know, that you are what you concentrate on, and, you know, manifestation techniques and The Secret and all the rest of it. So
Mm.
I feel that there is validity in that. You know, everything that we do literally comes from a thought. You know, somebody that made this chair that I'm sitting on, um, first it was a thought, and then they put it into practice, and, you know, everything comes from a thought. Everything we
Mm.
talk about, everything we do, we plan our route to work, all the rest of it. So we are our thoughts to an extent, absolutely. But I feel that when you in talking of sort of raising to like a higher level or somewhere else that you'd want to be in life and attracting those things towards you, that it's more about sort of just connecting again with the feeling of it, and just sort of living that. And again, it sounds sort of very woo-woo, but just when you sort of tap into that state of, okay, that absolutely is for me, that job, that relationship, or what have you. I feel that when you sort of get that intuitive hit that you know it's for you, it tends to go that way.
Mm.
So I feel that sort of moving beyond the sort of surface level thinking. Of course, we can all want stuff, and, you know, sort of think about this direction that we want to go. But I feel that the key is really sort of stepping back from the rest of it. You know,
Mm.
all the distractions and the doubts and this and that, and just tuning into that feeling of where you want to get to.
Mm.
I believe that again, sort of bringing the intuition into it, that's the direction to go in terms of sort of manifesting things.
Mm. Well, if you think about it, we are not just our thoughts. I mean, I might sit here right now and think, oh, I think I would like a nice big glass of red wine. That doesn't make me
Mm.
a glass of red wine, though. That just means that
Well,
that is
exactly.
something that pops in, you know. But that,
Yeah.
and that might then trigger a movement to go and open the bottle and pour a nice glass of Shiraz or something. But
Mm.
that doesn't make me my thought, does it?
Well,
So,
that's it. That's it.
so
And you know, we get so many doubts and distractions, and we're
mm,
constantly getting these bombarded with these things. You know, you step out onto the street, you'll see someone in a red t-shirt. That reminds me of some kid at school that wore a red t, you know, and you have
yeah,
this whole
yeah.
other thing playing out on your head while you're on your way to work. So yeah, I mean, you know, it is what it is. It's how it works. But being able to sort of just step back from that and realizing that you don't have to get triggered by what somebody
Mm,
says or
mm,
a past memory, all of that stuff, I think, excuse me, it really just does come down to that, being able to find that space in between. Yeah.
mm. But the power of thought is so wonderful because as a medium, the thought that comes through, and I had something just happen this week, and I was just
Mm.
talking to somebody, and the thoughts came through, and I know I was connecting with my guides. We'll talk about guides later. But
Yeah.
the thoughts are there, and I was able to then move on and go on with what I was doing. But the thought was given to me. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts tonight to pass on to you, but I'm not going to do it on air. Uh, and I don't know where I'm going with this all now, but anyway, thoughts are powerful. And you talk about thoughts that come through in our dreams. That was where I wanted to go to because,
Yeah.
like you, I've been woken up many times in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning. I've had people come to me. I've had past people from the past. I've had all sorts of. I've had an ancient Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, come through to me
Mm.
at 3 a.m. All these sort of things. So that thought that is put into your mind is a different thought to the one that you might be coming thinking of, saying, "Oh yes, I'd like that
Yeah.
glass of red wine." So there are different kinds of thoughts, aren't there?
Yeah, that's it. And I feel that that's where you start to recognize the difference. I'm literally just sorry, forgive me for just constantly talking about meditation. But again, when you sort of
No.
are able to just recognize that sort of passing parade of constant distractions that's just going to go on, and when you're trying to take that quiet moment to sit with yourself, they're still going to be there, but you just
Mm,
have to realize that you don't have to be attached to it. So let that go. And then when you recognize that you're over here observing all that,
mm,
then at least in my experience, in terms of mediumship, when something new has come in, it tends to come in the space in between. I know that it's not this over here. I know that it's not all that,
mm,
whatever that mess is over there going on constantly, but something new sort of slices in. And
mm,
then you're like, okay, that's the message here,
mm.
or that's something that's I didn't think of, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, in terms of sort of relating it to sleep, one interesting thing that I've had over the years, and again prior to my mum passing, would be I would a couple of times wake up just in that state of sort of being half asleep and half awake, where something was happening to me, it's pretty much like you said, like something from somewhere else was coming in, and I'm like, okay, what the hell is this?
Mm,
And sort of snap myself out of it. And interestingly, as I started learning about mediumship and meditation, all the rest of it, when the brain goes into the theta state, when you're at that point of just going to sleep or just
mm,
waking up, it's the same state that we go into during meditation, and also the same state that mediums go into when they're connecting with their guides, when the brain's been observed or scientifically tested. So we know that it's a real thing, and I feel that that's really something to take note of. Like when we have those moments, like you say, when you wake up and you might hear that voice, or I feel like a lot of people have had that experience of just hearing that voice close to your ear or something, someone saying your name. Um, it's worth taking note of just in
mm,
those moments,
mm.
and maybe noting it down or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, these things would happen, and I would be like, okay, well, that was weird, and then get on with my day. But again, it was only in hindsight, looking back at all these things, that I was like, oh, okay, this is always like every few years, I would have some sort of strange insight to something,
Mm.
and then I would just forget it and move on. But yeah, yeah, looking at things through a different lens now.
That voice that can come through. I just finished writing my memoirs, which I'm going to
Yeah.
get out, hopefully, to a publisher shortly. And you reminded me because one of the voices that came through to me was woke me up about 7 a.m. I was in bed, sound asleep, my partner next to me, and all of a sudden I had this voice, Barry, you must do this. You must do this now. What?
Right.
I won't say the rest. But that voice boomed into my head. Now, that's the
Mm,
only time
mm.
that's ever happened. I've had other voices, but have you ever had that?
Okay.
Have you ever had that
Not as per,
big voice?
I did have so I moved into this place about a year and a half ago. So I'm in London on the west side of London. Um, and I remember going into meditation and getting a sense of a lady here that had worked. We were just talking about it earlier, funnily enough. So a lady here, I got this impression that she was some sort of performer, like a local performer, like that there was something to do with the theater around the corner. While waiting for the first book to come out, I was kind of looking at just picking up an odd job here and there, and
Mm,
something came up at the theater, just helping out over there, just across the street. And I remember waking up one morning, and I know I had that interview, and I was very close to just being like, "Ugh, I can't be bothered." I wasn't going to go to it. And I distinctly had a female voice saying, like, "Get up, go now."
mm,
And this was a couple of days after sort of what I believe was recognizing somebody that lived here before. There was something to do with the theater.
mm,
And I went along and got the job. But yeah, that's the only time I've sort of had a direct voice. That being said, a few years ago, I had another very profound experience, and this was really one of the sort of key points that I went back to, with looking at it through a different lens. I woke up one morning. I was probably late 30s, something like that, so about 10 years ago. Um, and I remember just sort of coming out of sleep, and the best way I could describe it was as though I had and this sounds nuts, a rainbow stream of information going into the top of my head,
ah, going
as
through
though
the
something.
chakra.
Well, yeah, well, I didn't know anything about chakras or
Oh,
spirit
okay.
guides or anything like that at the time. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And it felt like something way smarter than me was giving me some sort of information.
Mm,
And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Whatever it was, it kind of freaked me out. And something was saying, do you still want this? Or or what? As though I'd agreed to it already. And
mm,
I was like, no, 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 no. No. And it stops. And interestingly, so I lay there for a second and I could see a holographic grid between myself and the ceiling. I know how this sounds. And I just watched it fade out and I thought, well, that's odd. So I wasn't with my fiance, we were in different places and I called her and she said, well, you were dreaming. And I was like, well, no, it wasn't a dream.
mm.
Then I called a friend of mine and he was like, oh, maybe you were like sleeping on your arm funny and you're seeing. I was like, no, it wasn't anything like that.
They all try to
Um,
explain it to you, don't they?
Right. So a couple of days later, I Googled it, thinking, okay, how am I going to Google it? Like seeing a holographic grid upon waking. I thought I'm not going
Yeah.
to find anything. There was this whole thing on it, of people experiencing this. And then later on, or when I started learning about mediumship, I talked to a medium called Claire Broad at the College of Psychic Studies in London, and she was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That was your guides getting in touch with you. That's where the crown chakra is,
Mm,
and all this." And she was the first person to not just sort of like dismiss this and yeah, again, looking back on it now it makes perfect sense. Also, going back, I learned a lot about shamanism, not being a self-proclaimed prophet or anything, but apparently there was a lot of talk about seeing grids when people would connect with spirit guides thousands of years ago. So, it was one of these things that I just dismissed. But again, looking at it with all the information I've got now, I was like, okay, well, yeah, that was a spirit guide, clearly.
mm, mm.
And I had other people tell me that they had a pretty much exactly the same experience as
Yeah.
well.
Now, you write a lot about shamans in the book, shamans, elementals, all sorts of wonderful people, nature spirits, pagans, spiritual healing. All of that is addressed in the book. And I think it's about time people start to realize the relevance of these things in our life
Mhm.
today. People are like, oh, what's that got to do? This is the 21st century. I can get everything on
Yeah.
my phone. No, you can't.
Mm, mm. No, I was very much of the same school of thinking. If anyone started talking about fairies or anything like that, I'd be like, "All right, no, that's like I
Even though
can
you
I
work
can
in the
take
theatre.
yeah, but I was like, I can take mediumship, and spirit guides and all the rest of it. But when we start talking about, elementals and fairies and all that stuff, I would just immediately just dismiss that. I'd be like, okay, that's not,
Have you ever been in a Midsummer Night's Dream?
No, no, I haven't. Well, actually,
There
as a
you
kid, I
are.
was. Yeah, now you mention it. But yeah, so I started looking into this, and one thing that I found immediately obvious was that there were so many similarities between what we talk about now as sort of modern day mediumship.
Yeah.
And then when you look back at Celtic mythology and all the stuff around the British Isles, and I didn't go everywhere, but I touched on a few things like South America and then Northern Europe, Scandinavia. There were so many similarities to all of these kind of ancient cultures in terms of connecting with spirit, which were exactly the same as what we do now as mediums.
Mm,
And then even back then, they were divided by oceans and they were talking about the same things. And even some of the same words were so similar when describing nature spirits and all
mm,
of that kind of stuff that I was like, well, that's amazing. Like that this was already connected
mm,
thousands of years ago, that we were having the same experiences on different sides of the globe. Yeah, so I just sort of again was learning about this stuff, so just sort of poured it into the book as I learned it.
that's right.
Yeah, I found it fascinating.
Mm. Now, time's getting away a bit, but the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, well, there's so many things I'd like to talk to you about, because you address things like astral traveling, but also connecting with our spirit guides. I get a lot of
Yeah.
people contact me and say, oh, how do I get in touch with my spirit guide? Well, having had several spirit guides in my time, I got a lot of help from them. My story is going to be different from everybody else, but
Yeah.
you're right about it. So what, apart from intuition, what do we do with getting in touch with our spirit guides? What's your advice?
Yeah, I don't want to keep repeating the same thing, but I feel that again, when you have that moment of sort of just sitting with yourself and that clarity and again stepping back from the thoughts, and then you do recognize when something a new voice comes in. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely lots of meditations around on YouTube and plenty of mediums that are sort
Mm,
of offering this guidance how to connect with that, and plenty of books. And also in my book, I sort of talk about the steps that open me up to this. And in theory, if somebody followed those steps and the meditations, then they could perhaps have the similar experience.
mm,
But yeah, I feel that just first of all, just getting used to that quiet voice of your own. Um, Behind all the thoughts. And then once you're sort of familiar with that, then I feel that really again opens the door to being able to invite something new in.
Mm.
And of course, I feel that we have these hits from them anyway, in times of crisis
Mm.
or what have you, or like you were talking about waking up, and hearing a voice. But yeah, I feel that being able to sort of actively draw them in, there are a few steps to follow in terms of, at least the way I do it is sort of opening up the chakras and just inviting in good energy and sort of setting the intention.
Mm.
And I feel like with any of this, that it's all about setting the intention and what you want to bring to
That's
it
right. Mm.
is what you get back from it. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I have chats with my guides all the time, but they're wonderful. And having a guide there, you have another guide you connected with overseas, the Cherokee. You gave her a special name. That's a lovely story in the book.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, it's again, there was a cynical part of me that was thinking that okay, well, it seems that everybody and their grandmother as a Native American spirit guide,
That's
and
right,
it was
don't
like,
they? Yeah.
but I was like, really? I was like, are there that many of them, really? You know,
But
um,
that's just the way they're presenting themselves. They don't
well,
have to
that's
be.
it. I
That's
mean,
right.
yeah, that's what I believe too. But yeah, so
Mm.
the experience I had was I was looking into this, like sort of like learning all about shamanism and sort of pouring it into the second book. And I did have an experience in meditation of a Native American lady sort of presenting herself to me and handing me a sunflower. And I thought, well, that's interesting, and I took note of it, but I had been learning about all that stuff anyway, about those cultures. So I sort of took it with a grain of salt in a way because I was thinking, well, I'm not surprised that I'm thinking about Native Americans when I've just been reading books about them for days. But I went into a spiritualist church the next night, and there wasn't much of a crowd there, so I got to just chat with the medium that was working that night. And he immediately brought her up, which I was amazed at, but by that point wasn't that surprised by it anymore. And
Mm.
he was like, "Oh, I believe you just met her already." And I was like, "Well, yeah, last night, funnily enough, you know." But he just sort of confirmed everything around this guide that I had, perhaps still have. I'm not sure. I haven't heard from her as directly as that before.
Mm.
But yeah, like again, just such a bizarre but amazing experience, and then to have somebody else confirm it
Mm.
was yeah really the thing.
But the name you came up with was so appropriate.
Yeah, Nanya He. Yeah, I sort of like after I wrote it all, I thought, well, I've got to be really careful here. I don't want to I don't want to offend anyone, and of course we have to sort of be aware of cultural appropriation and all that comes with it. But then at the same time, I feel like, well, we're talking about spirit guides, we're talking about connecting with
Mm.
other realms here. I don't feel like anyone has an exclusive hotline to it. You know what I mean? Despite cultural traditions that we have. So yeah, I mean, it seemed appropriate, and then I just sort of looked up this name sort of came to me, and then I looked it up later, and there was a historical figure that went with this name, which I found really interesting. I'm not saying that I absolutely attribute it to her. Who knows? But yeah, it's all sort of tied in nicely, as these things do, sort of unbeknownst to me. Then you look it up later, and it's all there, which is just a amazing thing that happens again and again.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, there are no coincidences. I don't believe in them. There's
yeah, no, that's
synchronicity, there's whatever you like to call it, but that was no accident. There was no coincidence. The way that
mm,
name was, I reckon, was fed to you because it was so perfect. Absolutely
yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, no, it was a really nice experience. It has been.
Mm.
I feel like I'm in touch with another one at the moment, and I'm still getting to know them. It's been about 3 years that I've been actively pursuing this now, so I feel like
Mm.
I'm still a very much a beginner in this
Mm.
field. So I'm sort of
Yeah.
aware of that, and I definitely don't know all the answers. I guess none of us do.
No.
But yeah, I'm sort of tentatively stepping into it and being aware of everyone that's come before and and especially in the UK there's a very strong spiritualist community. So
Mm.
I'm aware that people do this for years, rather than me just stepping in and writing two books saying, hey, let's all be mediums.
No, that's right. But I've had several guides over the years, quite a few. In fact, I have a new one that only came to me about 15 months ago, and she is
Yeah,
wonderful. Oh, absolutely fantastic. And she keeps on
yeah,
popping up at the right time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Phil, how do you feel now? Book number two is out. Have you started book number three yet?
I've started a book number three, but it seems that it's not going to be connected to these two. I feel that these two have very much been around my own personal story of losing my
Yeah.
mum, which was yeah 3 years ago now.
Can I say
Um,
something about losing your mum? because it hit me several times. You didn't lose your mum. And that's
Well,
something I
yeah,
put in
yeah,
my books about the after. I've written three books on the afterlife, and I
yeah,
don't believe we lose people. And I think that's something that you haven't lost her. You're still in connection
mm,
with her. We don't lose them
yeah,
because we know where they are, and they certainly know where we are.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
No,
mean to
that's a
pick
very
you
good
up on
point.
that. I just thought I'd mention it
No, no,
because
no,
it jumped
absolutely.
out at me at the time.
Yeah, no, no, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. I probably should think of a different way of phrasing it. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Does actually
But
help you
yeah,
with grief as well, I think.
oh no, I mean it definitely does. This whole thing has, re
Mm,
really helped me, and just learning about all this, it was immediately helpful.
yeah,
But yeah, third book. So I started writing another book, but it feels that it's moving beyond sort of my story and seems like
mm,
a broader thing. And I feel like it's amazing. You talk about automatic writing, and I feel that
mm.
I'm not writing it. Basically, it's turning into a conversation rather than the style of the other two books. So yeah, I'm interested to see where it's going because I'm absolutely learning stuff about this that I didn't know before. It's
Yeah.
amazing, and yeah,
Well, that's how my first book came. I had a
yeah,
master guide, and my finger would go across the keyboard, and I think, where the hell did that come from?
yeah,
And
yeah.
if you trust, you put it down, you never know where you're going to end up.
It's
So it's been
amazing.
wonderful talking to you once again, and the book is out now.
Yep, yep. The both books are available at all the usual places, and of course on Amazon. And then if any bookshop, they should be able to order it for you.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll put those details up. Phil, lovely to talk to you. You got any acting work coming up at the moment?
I just had a fitting, a close fitting for something yesterday, some sort of TV show. Probably not allowed to say what it is.
Don't
Bits
worry.
and pieces. It's not really been my main concern lately, but of course I'm not going to say no to them if they come up. So yeah.
Isn't it funny? I had the same thing. My full-time career as a radio, TV host, and also I did a lot of acting, voice acting. Once that
Yeah.
everything takes over from the other side, all that sort of
Mm.
dribbles away, and you're
Yeah.
left in a totally different direction. Sure
No,
transformation.
absolutely. Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, I'm not, if an amazing part comes up, I'm going to do it. I did
of
just
course.
spend 5 weeks in Iraq shooting a World War II drama, but that's a very exclusive market over there. But that was quite an experience in itself. But
Wow.
yeah, let's see. If something comes up, I'll take it, but it's not really my main directive anymore.
All right. Okay. Well, go well. Phil, great to talk to you again.
You too. All right. Thanks for having me.